Welcome to the Game of Life podcast, where we bring you inspiring softball stories, insightful tips from coaches and players, and explore how the game transcends its boundaries to become a metaphor for life. Whether you're a sports enthusiast, a casual fan, or someone just looking for inspiration, you're in for a treat. We'll unravel the tales that go beyond the scoreboard. Discover how perseverance and hard work on the field translates into resilience in your daily challenges. Learn about teamwork, leadership, and the unwavering spirit that fuels success, not just in sports, but in the game of life.
And welcome back to the Game of Life. Thank you all who have been supporting us. It's been really awesome to hear from all of you, just feedback and thoughts on a lot of our episodes. So we've been having a lot of fun, and we appreciate everyone who's been with us so far. Any comments on that you got there?
No, I think that's a great intro. You do a lot better job than I do with that.
Well, I'm actually going to open up tonight with a question for you. How about that? We're going to turn
Let's
the
do it.
tables around.
Let's do it. Tables have
So
been turned.
So one thing I want to talk about tonight, and I think this is a really important one that sometimes gets thrown on the back burner until kids are done playing their sport, is I want to talk about the athlete-parent relationship. So how do you maintain the relationship with your parents whilst being an athlete? So we're going to dive into everything from best practices parents. My dad's going to go into best practices an athlete. What do you do if your parent is also your coach? How do you kind of wear both those hats? So really excited about this one, and I'm going to turn it over to him just for some initial thoughts because in case anybody that didn't know, he is indeed a parent. So
Well, I'm going to be very transparent with this episode.
oh, okay.
uh,
I think that's apparent.
yeah. Yeah, apparently. All right. Well, we might have to edit this. First time ever. So I grew up, like I said, I we're gonna bring in a little bit from other episodes. I was the normal kid. I started playing golf. I played all the kids' sports growing up. I don't remember the need for finding a trainer, for finding time to have to work with just my dad or mom in the yard. I just played with my friends and had a passion and loved to compete. And I joked earlier with you that the way you and your sister were, like, if we had if it was travel horseshoes, that's what we would have done, because you like to compete. I feel sometimes it gets out of hand. Like, why are people playing? Why are you helping your children? And what do they want out of it? I don't think those discussions are enough. So I was just all over the place in the last minute. But my point was, I feel like a parent's job is to give an arena, provide the means, if possible, to help your child compete. I don't think there's any other terms besides that. What do you
And
think?
yeah, and I remember, so we have these at home videos we watch like on holidays of, me and my sister and our family from, when we were 3 and 4 years old. And there's one of my sister, she's playing soccer and everyone's kicking the ball around and she's just not moving on the field. And my dad's always like, how did she grow up to be a D1 athlete? Like, I would never guessed that she was going to be a D1 athlete. And same thing for me. Like, I hit the ball off the tee and I didn't even run in T-ball. It was just, it never in my family growing up was, this is something you're gonna do and this you have to do this, right? So we always joke every time, like, look at the career we both went on to have and look at how it started. And you weren't screaming. You heard my mom and dad behind the camera yelling, "Oh my gosh, run. She's so cute. She's so cute." Like, run. They weren't mad. Like, it was just so funny to watch. And I think just, I'm curious on your perspective of that, dad,
You
too, because
you were young when you started soccer, but you were so into watching all the other people. Like, I legit thought you had a processing problem. Because the ball would go and then you just look at whatever you were looking at, and 10 seconds later decide to maybe run after the ball or not.
yeah.
So and that's okay. And then you always have the kid that just right out of the get-go just gets it. right? And is really fast and understands this is fun, kicking and scoring, just to keep using the soccer analogy. So I don't remember anybody on your team, but I remember you and your sister were probably the worst two people on the team. But you had fun being there, and that's the first step,
Yeah.
right? I don't think I mean, you shouldn't. Maybe there's a game changer for soccer now. I don't know. But
Mhm.
you shouldn't be keeping stats. And I think we stuck true to that all the way up through your process, even getting recruited. But you you like to be there. You guys like being around any type of ball, a kickball, a soccer ball, a softball, a football. I give your grandfather a lot of credit for that. And then you liked being around other kids. And to me, that's the recipe. Go have fun with that. Go learn to cope. Eventually, we can get into the competitive side of it because it clicked
Mhm.
in with you really quick. We can tell some funny stories about that. But if you don't nurture that at an early age, do you like to be outside or inside a gym? Do you like to be around other people? Do you have fun doing it? Nothing else matters if you don't set that foundation, because everything else is going to crumble the older you get.
Yeah, and I think parent-wise, like one thing you and mom did really well growing up was I never felt, going into playing a sport like you need to be the starting this on varsity by the time you're in ninth or 10th grade. You just wanted me to have respect for other people. You wanted me to learn how to work hard. You wanted me to learn how to be part of a team, and you wanted me to learn how to hold myself accountable. And I think I did, like we did those things, but I was never entering into a sport or entering into it with some end goal of like, you need to get to this place. We're going to go here 4 times a week and we're going to compete. No, like you're going to go to practice. You're going to work really hard. You're going to make relationships with girls on your team and you're going to learn how to play a competitive sport and be a part of a team. And I think that was always, the thought process I thought you and mom had that was passed on to me of like, we're just going to go and work hard. And honestly, I think that's what gives kids the space to learn to love it and learn to enjoy it. Because if you decide you love it for me, I don't really have a choice anymore. And I feel like it's, something you have to do. And because of the way you portrayed it on me, it was something I got to do that I could have fun with.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Respect, hard work, being part of a team. I'm going to say part of something, and accountability. Like sports and what you're working for, it never has to do with that. It just has to be working on characteristics to give you happiness and success in life. And I can't tell you what that is. Your mom can't tell you what that is. A teacher can't tell you what it is. We can just keep putting you in the situation to work on things like that. And at
Yeah.
the end of the day, you're going to decide. Again, broken record. You were supposed to be a golfer.
Mhm.
But the ironic thing is now I'm a softball coach. So I transformed. And it's because I'm finding happiness of the things I used to find in golf. That's the whole point of playing. And whatever it is, as a parent, our job's to help you work on those characteristics in whatever venue you decide. Could be a musical, could be the piano, could be gaming now. Who knows? I mean, I don't have young kids anymore, but
But
you have to support your child in pursuing something.
but I think, when we talk about sports in the game of life, right? A lot of the stuff we talk about is learning how to get through adversity, learning how to deal with hard times, right? Kind of getting that body armor on or those calluses we were talking about last episode. Every hard thing you go through is going to make you stronger. If your parents don't give you room to fail, you're not going to take those lessons with you. So, what I mean by that, right, is there's a lot of kids, even who I grew up with, or I see this now, who I can just tell they go home maybe after a bad game, but it's not their fault, of course. Let's blame everybody else, right? Oh, sweetie, no, it's okay. Like, I know you didn't pitch well, but the pitch calls were really bad, and your defense wasn't good. Yeah, you walked 9 people, but that's okay. That happened. The ump was bad, you know. Where growing up for me, it was I came home, and if I even said something like, "Oh, the ump was bad," you were like, yeah, but if you would have threw a first pitch strike or if you would have swung at the first pitch, you wouldn't have had to deal with the one he called the ball. And coming from your parents, that means a lot too, especially from an early age, because it kind of taught me to shift my mindset of like, okay, I'm not going to blame other people. I'm going to give myself room to take the traits, right? Learn these traits that the sport is going to teach me because I'm not blaming other people and because I'm taking accountability for my actions.
Yep. I mean, the accountability. You didn't make the team. Okay, go do something else or work harder, right? Find something else to do. You struck out. Okay, learn from it and go to your next at bat. You made an error. It happens. Get better. Your coach is yelling at you. Okay, maybe respectfully ask him why the next day, but don't make a big deal of it then. You either like everything about the process or you don't get to cherry pick when it's fun and when it's not fun. Like, we could use cliches like embrace the suck, right? Well, I don't know if you embrace it, but you have to just work through it. There's nothing to embrace. Like, that's not fun, but you just have to know, if you don't embrace it, you'll never get out of the suck. And that's when people quit or burn out or blame people. And, those things happen. But it all goes back to trying to incubate certain characteristics or goals or pursuits, and then finding the venue to do it. And if it's softball, great. If it's piano, if it's volleyball, if it's reading, that's what
Mhm.
makes you successful. Of course, we're very sports heavy oriented in this podcast. So that's the venue we're going to use a lot, but it doesn't have to be. It's just what we used.
Yeah. And I'm curious for me too, having been, obviously a parent to both my sister and I at a pretty, high competitive level for a lot of years, and now being a coach, what advice do you have for parents? Or like, what are maybe top two or three things you see that you're like, that's got to change it just in general? Or I know that's a tough question, but I want you to be transparent here.
I
I want you to be honest about, and truthful about what you see, because I think those are tough conversations to have sometimes too, when you're a young adult saying to your parents, like, the way that you're treating me is not helping me play that.
the number one pet peeve, and I mean, you and Jenna and people could go back and watch video of when I was a parent watching you, what
Mhm.
most of your careers. The game advice has to stop. You are around your kid all day, and all of a sudden the game's coming and they're up to bat or they're kicking a penalty shot or shooting a foul shot. Well, I'll just stick with the softball analogies to keep it simple. And you've been working with, I mean, if you're that parent that works with your child all the time, you're hitting with them and you're helping them, they know that. If they can't transfer what you've talked about practicing to the plate without you yelling it from 200 feet away or sneaking behind the backstop and yelling it, they're not going to be successful, not long term. If anything, if you have an honest talk with your child, that probably makes them anxious. It probably tightens them up. It
Yeah.
probably keeps them from adjusting. And I know one thing they don't listen to, if they are listening to you, they don't actually listen to the coach. That in some instances is just trying to get you to compete. It's not about technique at some point. It's just about putting the ball in play. So the advice, if I had a nickel for the time parents, oh, they're out in left field. Where'd they go? Oh, they didn't go get a hot dog. They snuck behind home plate because their daughter's on double deck, right? Or they have to yell a code when their kids up of which way to slap the ball or hit the ball. It's ridiculous. Long
Mhm.
term, that doesn't help. So I think I gave you my pet peeve without ranting too much. But I
Yeah.
mean, you played. A, did I do that to you and your sister? And B, what did kids tell you back in the dugout, or players, if their parents were doing that, where they're like, "Oh, I'm so thankful my mom or dad gave me that last minute piece of advice for that gap double I just hit." That's
No,
not what happened.
I remember, I've had girls on my team before who they are, I don't even know what type of parents to call. They're active parents in the games, we're gonna
Active.
call them. And, let's say they strike out and they come back in the dugout, they're like, my dad needs to settle down. Like, he's crazy. They're not even talking about their at bat, they're just talking about how crazy their mom or dad is in the stands and everyone can see it. And I think it's tough too as a player because like you don't want to disappoint your parents. The people giving more than anything to help you be there, paying to have you on this team, like pouring all their energy into you. You don't want to upset them. So when you're trying to perform well, and anyone who's ever played softball or been there, like you can't be thinking about much in the box because it's coming at you pretty quick. So if I now have someone who I really, really care about in my ear yelling something that's not going to help me, like put it in play, right? Because I wasn't going to do that until you said it. Okay. That just doesn't make sense to me. And it's just, you're now then not giving room for the coach to coach because now, one, if I'm that player, I'm not listening to you and I'm not listening to my coach. And now I'm just this jumbled ball of thoughts right in the box focused on everything and everything except the one person I'm supposed to be focused on, which is the pitcher. So
Yeah.
it's just a big mess. And I think it's hard because it's hard as a 16-year-old girl to go up to your mom or dad and say, can you please stop doing that? Because it's making me anxious.
We watch a lot of the games during the College World Series, and the reason I bring that up, that's when it's with most people, that's when it catches most people's eyes. You watch all the great coaches, even just in the final stages of the World Series. Is the third base coach yelling advice? Is the first base coach yelling advice? Is the head coach yelling advice? I'm not saying they don't have a keyword or they don't have
Mhm.
a phrase they yell at somebody. If anything, the loudest people are the actual teammates in the dugout cheering because the coaches have practiced and planned and have a process. And now it's up to you against the pitcher to adjust, or pitcher versus batter, or fielder versus hitter, whatever you're doing. Now, people could say, well, that's a high level. Of course, that's the way it goes. Okay,
Mhm.
why can't it be that way at 10 or 12? Your talks might be longer in between. I just had a talk with a good friend of mine that was a high school baseball coach for years, and his daughter plays softball now. If he's listening, he'd know who he is. They went the night before a weekend tournament to a cage and hit for 2 hours, and she was locked in, he said, and adjusted, and then struck out 7 of 8 times the next day. And his
Mhm.
wife goes, aren't you going to say something to her? And he goes, no, I said everything I had to say in those 2 hours last night. So
Yeah.
we will talk tonight if she wants to talk, and we'll
Mhm.
make that adjustment for next time. So making those adjustments at 10 when nobody remembers what your stats are, and I don't think she has a Twitter page yet or a recruiting page yet with stats, that's what's going to make her next level if she even wants to pursue it. Nobody
Yeah.
knows at that age, but that's what's going to make her next level anything she decides to do.
And I think as a parent, you have to remember too, right? And I'm an athlete, so let's say you're chirping at me all game
No,
every
you're
game.
no, you're a retired
I'm a
athlete.
retired athlete. Yeah, yeah. Let's just I was putting myself in the scene. I was setting the scene. So let's just say, I'm up to bat, right? And you're chirping at me all game, every game. So now I've just tuned you out completely. So even after the game, if you have something valid to say to me that would probably be helpful, that's just noise. Like I've decided that I'm not going to listen to anything. So almost like the validity of what you say goes down the more that you talk. Whereas if you only talk to me between games, and there were a lot of times this happened with us, right? Like you wouldn't tell me anything in game, but I'd come to you after and be like, what am I doing wrong? I would ask you for help instead of you just yelling at me all hours of the day.
I don't know if you remember, sometimes I would say stuff like it just wasn't your day. And you didn't like that for an answer because there had to be some technical aspect of why you didn't play
Yeah.
well. We
Yeah.
used to have those arguments. Well, you had two loud outs and you did this.
Oh my
All
gosh,
I
I
know,
used to get so mad because he was like, well, your swing looked really good. I'm like, that's great. It looked aesthetically pleasing, but I grounded out 6 times. So please give me some
it's
positive feedback. And or please give me some helpful feedback. It was so funny. Yeah.
the only time I should have given you feedback was in college when you went up to bat and three pitches. You didn't swing the bat and then you walked back into the dugout. Like I should have
Yeah.
said swing the bat next time.
Right. And I probably would have if I heard you yell that from the stand. So that would have been really
Do you,
helpful.
do you remember? That's one of my funniest stories.
Oh my God.
What happened when you walked in the dugout?
So this is one of those times you just gotta laugh about, and then we'll get back on track. But I don't even know who we were playing. It was a home game, and I was doing pretty well. Like I wasn't in a slump or anything, but I just went up to bat. I think she threw me outside. curveball at the knees, so pitcher's pitch, strike one. Cool. What was the second pitch the changeup? I'm trying to remember. I think
I
second
think
pitch
so.
was a changeup, and it just kind of buckled me. So now I'm down 0-2. And then I got rung out on like a river pitch by the umpire, and I was literally up there for 3 pitches, and I didn't swing at any of them. And I walk back to the dugout, and my hitting coach is just kind of like head down, and I go, "Whoo, that wasn't good." And she goes, "No, it really wasn't. Let's not do that again." I was
But
like, "You got it."
that brings up another great point because a lot of times growing up, dads are in the dugout, right?
Mhm.
Uh, so a coach here, you're at the highest level, and you literally did the least amount of work you could possibly do hitting, meaning not swing the bat. And not that you were joking, a little bit of sarcasm in there. And they're
Right,
like, no,
right.
let's not do that again. There wasn't like, why didn't you swing?
That
Or
was
what
my
were you
way of
thinking on?
self-coping, like was just to laugh about
Right.
it because
But they weren't like, why didn't you swing on the 0-2 pitch? Or why didn't you swing? Like, it was just like, okay,
that
one
sucks.
time, one time's never a problem in anything in life. So make the adjustment. If you pout about it or you're yelling at your player about it, then the next time they're thinking about not getting yelled at again, and then instead of about the adjustment. So it just comes down to the four things you said in the beginning of the podcast that we don't even prep for: respect, hard work, being part of something, and accountability. If your child, I'm back to being a parent again, isn't doing those things or working towards those four things, I don't even know what the point of the game is, really.
Yeah. And I think one other thing I want to touch on, I know you talked about your one pet peeve, but I kind of have one too. And I'm interested your take on it is, when I see a parent come up to a coach and be like, "Hey, like I know Susie doesn't want to tell you, but like her curveball's really not working today." Okay, well, why doesn't Susie come tell me that? I'm making up names, but as a parent, there is like no better skill you can have for your kid than learning how to advocate for themselves or learning how to communicate. Growing up, my parents never talked to a single one of my coaches without me knowing. Like it just never happened because if I found out they did, one, I would have been super embarrassed. And two, I would have been angry because I would have been like, hey, I can handle this myself. And that statement is stemming past like 12U, let's just say. Like I'm sure you talk to coaches in 8U and things like that, but it was always my responsibility. And if someone's hurt, like they're not feeling right, that's your responsibility to tell your coach. If one of your pitches isn't working, that's your responsibility to tell your coach. If you're upset about something else, tell your coach. Like you have to learn how to communicate with that almost authority figure instead of having, mommy and daddy do it for you. And I think that's something that's super important too.
It's so important. I mean, it almost, if you're covering for your kid, I, I used to think it's like an arrogance, but it's almost like I'm missing out on the word here. It's almost like a insecurity. That's what I'm looking for on your
Mm-hmm.
part. There's nothing to be insecure about. I don't care what any coach thinks about me. I want a coach to think that my child can work hard, be part of something, hold themselves accountable, and
Mm-hmm.
communicate that you just added. And there's no other reason to play the sport if you can't do those things. It just it blows my mind. And so the hardest thing for me coaching the first 2 years I've got back into the high school level is I know that and I've been through that, but nobody cares what you and me did growing up. That,
Mm-hmm.
the one or two times I've brought that up to a parent, oh, it's different now. Oh, oh, well, that's just not how my child is. Well, okay, make them that way or help them try to become that way. And so the patience that I've exhibited has been tough because I want to just yell at them and say, you don't even understand how it works. But if they don't discover it, there's nothing anybody can tell them, is there?
Well, and I think the thing that I don't understand, or I think that parents need perspective on, is like if your kid can't go talk to their high school softball coach in that should be a low pressure environment, honestly, in the grand scheme of things. How are they going to go talk to their professor in a 400-person lecture the next year, potentially, if they're a senior? How are they going to go talk to their boss at work? How are they going to advocate for themselves in a job interview without you there? Like, I almost think you're doing them a disservice by not letting them do that. And that may be a hot take, and I understand it because if you think your kid is quiet and things like that. But honestly, like, you're not allowing them to develop the skills that they need to thrive later on in different situations.
Right. Or how are they going to have tough conversations in a relationship with a partner or spouse or anything? And what happens is if you don't learn it young, oh, you're going to learn it at some point because it's going to happen to you. But there's going to be a lot more at stake than a 10U trophy, right? Or a
Yeah,
free hot dog after the game when you win, or a slushy or whatever, is happening.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that again, that's the whole point. And I
Well, and I
think the
think
whole
sorry, I
no,
was
go
just gonna
ahead.
say,
No, 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 go ahead.
as you get older, I want to call them like more high pressure, like more advanced conversations. If you're not doing those stepping stones of, all right, I got to learn how to talk to my middle school teacher. Now I need to learn how to talk to my high school basketball coach. Now I need to learn how to talk to my professor. Now I need to learn how to talk to my boss. Now I need to learn how to manage my relationships. Like every one of them is a stepping stone that you almost have to go through to be prepared for the next one. So if you're skipping 4 of these steps, yeah, going to a job interview is going to seem scary because you haven't read any of the test prep. Like you haven't gone through any of the manual that you need to be prepared for that.
Allie, I called your boss yesterday. I didn't want to tell you because I heard your last four spreadsheets were perfect, and I didn't think you got the respect you
Yeah.
deserve. So you should be getting a raise soon because I called and bitched him out. Pardon my language. Okay. I
Yeah.
mean, that sounds ridiculous, but that's what's happening when
Yeah.
you're younger. It's the same thing.
But also, on the flip side of that, if you're an athlete and you're letting your parents do that, that's partially on you too. Because if you took the initiative, it's both ways, right? Like it's because I'm thinking of me as an athlete, and I was always pretty type A, outgoing. Everybody knows that. Like if you did that, I would have been so mad at you. Like I would have been so embarrassed. But some kids nowadays are like, "Hey, mom, can you go talk to them for me?" Hell no.
You know what else becomes very dangerous about this? If you're always speaking for your child or you're always blaming other people. We touched base a little bit last week, but I just wanted to bring it up again. Over time, you're just not being truthful. And there's lying to yourself or your child or not battling stuff head on and being accountable never ends well in the long run. I don't care what your justification is, protection, you're thinking you're being abused, bullied, whatever, it never ends well. You have to attack it.
Mhm. Agreed. And I know we're probably coming up on time here, but the last thing I want to talk about for the next, 5 minutes is how do you manage when you are a coach and a parent at the same time? Because I know that's something you did for a long time. What are some best practices there? Or what did you learn, maybe the hard way or, throughout that process?
Well, it makes you
Because I think you
vulnerable.
did it very well. Let me
Well,
preface
well,
with that.
thank you. And to be clear, I never coached you in high school or,
No.
any type of school ball. Uh, the big thing about the travel ball is I jumped full steam ahead and stopped
Mhm.
playing golf. And I was an educator. So I was the parent that had a lot of free time. Right. And over time, I really feel I transformed from just being a parent into a coach, but it does make you vulnerable. I think the first thing is to know your child, like your older sister, Jenna. She wouldn't want me to say a word to her in the dugout, no matter what, not even congratulations on a home run or
Yeah.
hustle through first base. Those were talks later. You you sometimes wanted immediate feedback, and then we'd have to discuss what the feedback is without it looking like dad and daughter are I don't
Mhm.
want to say arguing, we never argue, but without me just walking, oh, there he is talking to her again. It was just
Right.
really, really quick phrase like, hey, do this next time, do
Yeah.
this next time. The second thing is to make sure you're there for everybody. And if you're truly a great coach as a dad, you're probably going to not pay as much attention to your own child sometimes. But
Mhm.
well, a lot of times. But we had all the other days of the week when we weren't practicing to do that type of thing too.
Yeah.
And thick skin, if you ever hear a parent make a comment, if it's not directed right at you, then you just keep walking. It's a superpower. Because you could walk into a certain situation. If you do those things and you're honest with everybody, I think overall, the other kids, and we know lots of kids we played with, I think overwhelmingly, your teammates were happy I was in the dugout. I'm not trying to be conceited.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't think it was a bad. I think a lot of times people didn't even think like, oh, there's the dad and the daughter,
Well, and
but
I
you have
love
to
that.
focus on those three things.
No, and I love those things, and I honestly love the experience of you being my coach too, because like you were just so good at it. Because girls on the team would be like, "I love when your dad's in the dugout," which obviously was so good for me to hear because we worked really hard at like having that good relationship. And I think the second one you said of like being there for everybody, you truly were, and that's why people wanted you in there, and they thought of you as a coach, not just like, "Oh, that's Allie and Jenna's dad." Like, no, that's Coach Richmond is who that is. So I think that's huge too. And I think from my end, the last piece that I've seen before too is if you are truly a coach in there for everybody, you can't act upset when the team's winning and your daughter is doing bad.
Big one,
Yeah.
because that will happen in this sport. Like
Mhm.
I know there had to have been times you and your sister were like 0 for 6 for the game, but we're winning 5-0.
Mhm.
I'm not in the corner giving you instruction on your next at bat.
You're
We're just
focused on winning the game and the 10 other people who are playing well.
yeah, and there's one other thing. I was almost always an assistant. I think I always was an assistant looking
Yeah.
back.
Hmm.
Maybe the one summer in Boulder, I was kind of the head because Lou wasn't there, but that's a whole
Yeah.
nother story.
Minor
Uh,
details. Yeah.
when when there's a decision made where you're benched or you're put in another position or you're down in the lineup, I never, ever, ever talked to the head coach about that situation. And just because I was in the dugout. Now, in theory, I'm the head coach, or if I'm an assistant, I can question what the head coach is doing and have conversations with him. But I couldn't afford to do that. That's where you and your sister had to go talk to the coach. I did not even give my opinion on lineup changes because I didn't want it. That's where the vulnerability comes in. I can't say, oh, why is she batting third? You know.
Well, you know what your reaction always was is we get in the car and say, "Hey, like, how'd you feel about being moved down in the lineup today?" And I'd tell you, and you'd be like, "All right, well, what do we need to work on to get you back up to three?" It was
Right.
never someone else's fault. It's okay, that kind of makes sense. We can see why you got moved down. Like, let's go work on what you need to get moved back up to the position that you want. Like it again, it was never an excuse. It was just what can we work through to get where you want to be? Because that's the thing. I feel like just a lot of athletes and a lot of parents need to step back and be like, what is our goal here? One, do we like the person that we're creating, which is the main one? Parents, do I like the person I am when I go to my child's games? Like, there was a mirror in front of me while my child was playing. Like, can I look at myself and be okay? Is that, that's a big one. And then three, like, where are we going? What direction what's our goal? And is our behavior aligned with those goals? Because sometimes it's not, right? Because you see parents who are willing to blow out any other kid's light just so their child shines, but then you ask their kid if they even like softball and they tell you they want to quit next year. So it's just a really big disconnect, I think, between some of those things.
We'll end with this because it's easy for us 17, 18 years later to be like,
Right.
oh, when the bad times happen, it happens. And when the good times happens. No, there were car rides where we could be screaming. There were car rides where we're mad, whether I'm mad at a coach or you're mad at a coach. But the point is you cool off and you settle down and try to deal with it instead of overreact to it. Like I'm not saying those bad times were as easy as we're talking about. Oh, they grate on you and eat at you, but you can't share that with the world.
But the
Doesn't
key
it?
is cool down before you react,
Yeah.
always.
Yep.
And last thing
Well,
on with parents is don't carry your kids' bags. That's it.
uh,
That's all I got. That's all I got.
You didn't know I used to put 20 pounds of rocks in your catcher's bag.
You didn't have to. I had 80 water bottles in there.
I was joking with the rocks, but yeah, that time you emptied your catcher's bag in the garage and there were like 78 water bottles or something like that. I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
Anyway, hey, this was great. And again, the point of this isn't to lecture anybody. The point, like, this was our journey and that's what we did. And it it's never good to do it the other way. I mean, I don't
No,
know
and
what
there's
you
things we could have done better too, as always,
Yep.
but we learn from it and we move on.
So I'm going to summarize with this. I mean, the whole point of playing is to build respect, work hard, be part of something, and hold yourself accountable through communication. And then you said the whole point is, as a parent, what am I creating? As a parent, am I happy who I am? And then where are we going as a family?
Yeah.
And that's super powerful.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, until next week, we'll talk soon.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.